All right, welcome back. We got a great podcast today. We have Principal Mr. Wisniewski here with us today. We're gonna talk what it's going like. Well, he was the coach at played at Montclair State, coach at Montclair State,
captain.
Coached at Duma. Well, I'll let you interject those things along the way.
I gotta give this cross. The poor guy. Listen, Dave, you guys share a very similar back. The guy was a fullback. Like, feel bad for him. You know what I mean? Like,
got no love touching the ball.
Yeah, and you were a fullback 10 years after me, when at least we still were involved in the offense back then. But eventually,
and now they're not even on rosters.
I was a guard with a cool number.
The better way to put it. 100%, dude.
Yeah, that's pretty funny actually. That's right. Yeah, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, you can play fullback, you're gonna carry the ball. You know, it was like 5 carries a game. You know, I was like, well, bang into guys.
Dave was like a track sprints, like, you know what I mean? Like, he was a sprinter in track in high school, and like, and then moved them. It's funny, dude. It's a funny.
Two passes.
Then he had to move to linebacker, dude. Like, I mean,
linebacker was great. So I moved over there. I didn't know I'd be thrilled, but I was thrilled because you're involved in the action all the time. You know what I mean? Yep. And you didn't have to. You were killing them versus you trying to dig out a 270-pound DN when you weigh 225. You know, I was like,
it's all about angles.
It's all. Well, back then, though, see, when you were in fullback, it was about angles. It had moved to that direction. When I was first fullback the first 2 years at UConn before Coach Schultz came in and then changed the offense, I really wasn't a fit and moved over to linebacker, and that was where I started the rest of the career there. When I was starting fullback originally, there was no such thing as like angle. Like, you had to dig that. You had to take the angle, but you had to dig the
like through that guy's throat.
It was like you couldn't position. Like, you had to dig these guys out. So the worst play of all was when we would run our blast. We ran it like 2 ways. We ran it where, you know, the tackle would block out and you know, traditional, like, but then we also ran down block, like a power down block with a wrap, and then my job was to kick out the defensive end. And I tell this story all the time. We were playing JMU, we beat them, but they had a defensive end that was like an all world, all conference or all American defensive end. And I was like, I'm just gonna try and kill this guy. So I went to go to dig him out, and I went full speed, and I was like, I killed him. And I looked up. I was 1 yard from the quarterback. He had pushed me back like 2 yards. I tried to kick him out. I was like, oh my God, this 270-pound DN was unmovable.
That was our whole offense at Montclair, was down, kick out, and we were the kick out. Guard pulls through. So it was just finding that angle and using the fact that I'm 5'8", and a lot of these guys are 6'2", 6'3". Just play the odds.
Yeah, that's it. You got lucky. It worked out more in your favor than it did, Coach. But that's part of it.
And Eugene Vick was the benefactor of a lot of those dig outs. And
oh my God, it was fun though. It was fun. Then then they throw you pass in the flat every once in a while. You're like, oh, yeah.
Or at least they'll send you out in the route to make it.
Yeah, send me out in the route. You got a
shot.
Yeah.
And my big run play was, I don't know if you ran this at Montclair. My big run play was the trap. That was what we ran. The fullback ran. No, you guys didn't run that. We ran.
Listen, we were fortunate too. Like, my senior year, we ended up, like, my last 2 years there, we had one hell of a fullback who was like a 5th-year guy in Vinny Verkatapane, whose younger brother Nick played at Western Michigan as a DN, but this guy was a fullback. Dude, he was like a 5th-year guy at Montclair State, like, came back, like, I don't know, don't ask me why, like, just to play fullback. Like, literally, that's all he did. And, you know, like, you're talking about the ugliest dresser, no gloves, no nothing, wore number 45, just, like, did all the dirty work. And, like, as a 5th year in a D3 program, and he was a dog. Like, it was, and he mattered. He factored into it because we had a couple of backs that were pretty damn good. only because of him. You know what I mean? So it's weird to see how offenses have kind of, gone away from it. I think you're starting to see a little bit of it coming back. Now it's not the fullback, but like, you're a D lineman and like, hey, you go on the other side or, something of that nature. They kind of just add that factor in, but there ain't nobody with a fullback on the roster.
No, and it's more of that H-back where you get a guy like Kyle Juszczyk on the 49ers.
He's kind of changed the mold a
little bit. In there, but he can get out, run routes. Or you get to look at the guy like Ricard on the Ravens.
Yeah.
A converted D lineman that's just a monster. It's all about your offense and what you want to do behind it.
Yep, 100%.
No doubt. Coach, when you moved from coaching to administrator, what was that like for you?
It was interesting. It was one of those circumstances. I had I was 30 years old. We just had my daughter, 6 months old at the time. Opportunity came up, and at the school I was teaching in Dumont High School, and it was hard. I will say that was one of the hardest decisions I made. I really enjoyed coaching. I really enjoyed that environment. I like teaching, coaching, all of that. And when you looked at it, the opportunity to help your family, but also have a greater impact in the school, I thought was just at that time just too great to pass up. And looking back, hindsight, it was a great opportunity, and it still has. And I'm fortunate that I had that opportunity at Dumont, where I was teaching, and then being able to move over to Wayne Valley for a couple of years, and now here at Palm Lakes as the principal.
Principal is quite a task in a sense that you've got to manage the whole entire school and everybody pulling you in 9,000 different directions. What from football, and in the old days, all the administrators used to come, like when I was coming through high school.
Yeah, they were all coaches.
They were all coaches. Didn't mean they were necessarily football coaches, but they were all coaches who came through and became some level of administrator. What is about football and sports that really, helped you to really kind of transition into a principal?
Well, I would even think, going back to the interviews, one of those always problems is like you're interviewing for these positions, whether it's a head coach, principal, assistant principal. There's always that idea that like you don't have experience. So for me, going into that assistant principal interview, I had the experience of coaching. You have the experience of delegating tasks, staff, working with the community, working with parent associations. So the idea that you can show your leadership in coaching is where that transition comes into administration, because if you can lead, and that's really it, whether you're coaching or you're a principal, assistant principal, you're a leader in your school, and you're a leader for the kids, and you always want to make that positive impact. So when you're looking at it, that's that transition. It's similar in the way that people look to you in certain situations, and being a head coach, for that first time, you realize, the buck stops with you really in that program. And as a principal, it really was that same sort of feeling. Moving from assistant principal to principal was like, all right, now you are making that final decision. You are making that choice to go in one direction or the other. As a head coach, you're never going to make everybody happy. You're never going to make happy or the parents happy. You just try to do what you think is best and trust your judgment, trust the people around you. And as a principal, you're trying to do the same thing. I recognize not everybody's going to appreciate every choice I make, every decision I make, whether that's parents or kids or the teachers, right? But at the end of the day, I just want them to trust I'm doing what I believe is in the best interest of our school and of our community as a whole. And everybody's perspective on that's a little different, where my view is got to be more holistic in the way that it impacts as many people positively as I can.
When you're when you're leading as a principal and you got all the different parties pulling at you in all the different directions, like what's kind of your overall philosophy from a leadership standpoint? Because you have the different departments, English department, to the athletic department, to the staff who's working in the school, to the cafeteria, to all the different things that are going on within the school in the day. What kind of is your approach to leadership with all the different groups that you work with?
I think for me, I recognize everybody has their role, and my role is different and unique than everybody else's. But I can't be successful unless the teachers are successful. And the teachers individually need all different things to be successful. But we also need our administrative staff to be successful. We need our coaches to need to be supported so they could be successful. And if our teachers find success, that trickles down to our students. So my approach always is, I'm just a piece to this greater wheel that is going. And for us to move on a steady, smooth path forward, we all have our roles and we all have our responsibilities. But when you go ahead and sit and talk with the people, you have to hear them from their perspective. You have to see where they're coming from, and you have to have those honest conversations with everybody. Sometimes they're not easy. Sometimes you got to hear things as a leader that you don't necessarily want to hear or don't want to acknowledge. But I think as you go ahead with leadership and you go ahead with pushing something forward, you got to be willing to put yourself out there and hear the feedback, and then not only hear it, but put it into play. People aren't going to come to you with things if you just tell them no all the time or ignore them. You could have every committee in the world, but if you're just going to run that committee as you see fit, and you're going to just make your choice at the end of the day that you do anyway, without taking any of their input in, then what's the point? What's the point to that? Now they're not invested. Now they're not falling behind it. So there is certainly times that there's that spectrum of decision making, where there's times where I just have to make a decision, but I still want their input. I still want their background. And even if I'm going to go differently than what some of the teachers are, I want to give them that opportunity. I want to have that opportunity to explain why I'm going in the direction I'm going and where the choice and where the decision making is coming from.
Because do you think that because you kind of came up through the ranks, right? Like you taught for a long time and then you were you had some other administrative roles. Do you think that puts you in a different position, when it comes to that, because you can put yourself in a teacher role or, in that other administrator role, when now ultimately you do have to make that decision? Like you said, like you've been in those other spots. Do you think that's benefited you to where you are now in terms of kind of looking at that and then talking about that feedback and whatnot?
I definitely think it is. And that goes, when you think about that's just leadership in general. Right. I think you if you walk into a room thinking you have all the answers, then you're never going to be a leader in that room. Like you have to walk into that knowing that you can learn from other people, and other people, not necessarily just those people, but from past experiences. So I was fortunate to have taught in one school in Dumont, which has its lore, and then going to Wayne, which is a much bigger school, much different environment. Now you're taking the big school, small school, but through that time, I've connected with school leaders, across the state to learn about different things, learn about how they approach certain situations, what ideas they have regarding mental health or the mental well-being of your students, or thinking of something like a block schedule. If we're going to switch our schedule,
that's awesome.
What are schools that are doing it? What are they doing well? With those people. So it's not just me saying this is my idea. Well, this is an idea that's going on in this school, and this worked well for them because I talked to this principal and that's the feedback I've gotten, or I've talked to this superintendent. So just like coaching, you build a network. You build a network of people. Like I remember as a coach, when I became a head coach, there were a couple areas that I really trusted the people around me. Like DJ Nymphius was a huge influence on. He's been on. Started doing it in Elmwood Park, and he connected us. He was able to connect me with, in one of our talks to Drew Gibbs, and Drew Gibbs gave me stuff about practice schedules. You can pull something from everybody, right? As a coach, you're always looking for that competitive edge, whether that's not just scheme X's and O's but like, how do I change my practice plan? Like one of the things we got from Drew Gibbs was like breaking down your practice schedule days into long yardage, short yardage days, openers, and you're putting context instead of just running team and saying we're going to run 30 plays on team, but with zero context to why, right? So and then you go into a game and it's 3rd and 8 and your kid runs a 7-yard route. How often have you practiced in team? It's 3rd and 8.
Yeah,
this route 9 back to 8. So now as a principal, you're taking that same concept. I don't necessarily have to have all the answers, but if I have a network of people around that I could reach out to, that I can trust, that I can go to, and ask them these questions and bring that information back, or connect my teachers or my staff with them and their people, that's a huge benefit. And that's where, when you look at that alignment between just leadership, it's just trusting and building a network of people that you could rely on to go to so that you could maximize the choices.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference. I didn't realize you were at Elmwood Park back when I was over at Powell Park, but we probably never crossed paths because you guys were at.
Well, we did, because you guys beat Hawthorne in 2012.
Okay.
And we beat them for the league title same year.
Okay, that's right. Because it was still, that was that's right. You guys had gone to the NJIC like a couple of years earlier, right, from the BPSL, and then that's right. Because I remember that conference all of a sudden got huge. You became a huge conference. It's interesting because when you've been at a place like Elmwood Park, you understand. Like the dynamics of having to build something up and helping people understand like how to go from somewhere that wasn't successful to become successful, and then you start to see what that is in the kids, right? So like Pompton Lakes is obviously a place, not just as a, obviously athletically, but as a school as a whole, that's had a lot of success, I think, in general. What are some of the things that you like to really like reflect with your students at Pompton Lakes, and what do you want them to get out of their high school experience?
Well, I think when you think about a high school experience, it's all about all that the school has to offer. Academics is important, and you want to build that structure as you can so that they're prepared for what comes after them. But it's also about all the different activities and all the different traditions. And Pompton Lakes is super strong in their traditions. And it's fantastic. The kids look forward into it. Last year for me, it was like learning and being brought into these traditions. And they welcomed me with open arms, like, you just jump right in. And, I think when kids leave Pompton, what I would hope for them is they look back and they were happy about their experience. They look back, they have memories, they were able to build that tradition. They left their legacy for the below them that they could look back to, and that we want to tell them that they're always welcome back. Like, just because they're graduating doesn't mean that we're not there to help them anymore. I'm still staying in touch with at least one of the kids. He's playing at Montclair now, and went to go see one of his games. I mean, and he's a great kid, and I'm glad kids want to stay in touch and be there to help them in any way possible that I can. So building that, you want to look back and make sure that you're providing them with that experience too. So one of our focuses that we've changed our mission statement really to focus on the 3 E's, and that's employment, enrollment, and enlistment. So that we want our kids, when they leave here, to have a plan for what they do outside of high school, and whatever venue that is. So we just had kids go to the Universal Technical Institute. That's a trade school. So we want to provide not only just the 4-year and 2-year options for kids with college, making sure that we're bringing in trade schools. We're setting up a career day for later in the year where we're going to engage the community, engage alumni that, in their careers, if they want to come back and speak to our kids, expose them to a variety of different careers. We're also working with the Chamber of Commerce in town to be able to build connections through our like our work-based learning programs and our internship programs. Like if you take a small business in town, and we started doing this in Wayne, you take a small business in town, say it's a bakery, they're good at baking, but are they great at marketing their
right,
product?
yeah.
Are they good at marketing their company? But our kids are going through that in class. So what we're able to do is our kids serve as their intern, and they're basically their social media marketing directors. And
it's amazing.
They go online, create a social media account, and manage that account. Something that from a business perspective, they may not have that background. They're great in the kitchen, but when it comes to managing finances or managing a marketing standpoint, that's where we're trying to engage our community that, listen, this is what our kids are being prepared with. So is there a benefit to you in this community for a kid to do an internship with you? So it's trying to build those connections and those relationships in town, to be able to grow the different experiences that our kids could have. And it's not just, even though college is for some towns, it's a huge priority, and it is still for us. We just want to get that whole spectrum, all of our students, opportunities for what comes after that, where it's not solely focused just on college and 4-year colleges, because that's not what works for everybody.
Correct.
And it works for some, and we need to make sure we're preparing them for that. But we need to make preparing all of our students for whatever comes next for them.
Yeah, I think that's first of all, there's a shift too, because college has become so expensive that there's been a slight shift, and it's probably going to be even bigger shift where, and because you go online and get educated in certain job tasks and skill sets without having to go to college, or you can go to, a 2-year school or a trade school to be able to do that. And I think people are now looking for more economical ways to accomplish the same thing. And sometimes that means going to college and taking advantage of those opportunities, especially with certain things that you want to learn. And then sometimes it's, preparing them for like what you talked about, different things to prepare them for employment, because I think you're going to continue to see a lot bigger shift where people want to come out of high school and say, okay, is there an opportunity for me to be able to work now in something? Because it's so expensive to go to college. And if you're not going there unless you're going there for specific things to study, I think you're going to see a lot more people and parents saying, hey, I don't know that I want to spend it. I'd rather, if you want to be a coder, I'd rather you go to classes or get a certificate in certain types of coding. You know what I mean? Things like AI, you can go and learn that online now. You know what I mean? So there's lots of things you can go and do from that standpoint. You could teach some of that in school, right? As well, where they could come out of that and be able to learn some of those things in school. So it's really cool to see that you're offering that variety, because I remember it was like you kind of had, for a long time, you had the tracks where people were in college track, and then you got people that were in the trade track. That started to shift to everybody should go to college. Yeah. Everybody should go to college, and a lot of people have realized that doesn't work for everybody either, right? So,
and what you're seeing a lot from the colleges is, I know Rowan has it, Caldwell has it, William Patterson, Ramapo. It's like a 2x2 program. So you spend 2 years at the community college, you're accepted into the 4-year school, but you spend your first 2 years at the community college, and all your credits transfer in. And the difference is you're paying the community college rate versus the 4-year college rate, which is a difference. And I mean, obviously we've all been to college the first couple of years, unless you know exactly what your major is, you're going to take general ed requirements. I spent 2 years undecided at Montclair before I went in as a math major and got done with all my general ed requirements. If it wasn't for football, could I have done all that at Bergen Community College? Absolutely. And when you start looking at price, it's more economical. Which the other shift you're seeing at high schools, and I'm proud that we've been able to do this. You're seeing a lot more dual enrollment credit classes being offered at the high school level. So kids are earning college credits while sitting in classes, paying a fraction of the cost. Where some of the schools we work with is anywhere from $300 to $500 for a 3-credit class, where you're paying a couple $1,000s for that in the college level. So if kids maximize what we can offer here, or maximize what their school offers while they're still in high school, they could walk into college as either a second semester freshman, or in some cases, I know a girl from Valley actually walked into Temple University as a sophomore straight out of high school just by credits.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think it's getting college credits in high school.
Yeah, starting to see a lot more of that.
You also get to decrease not only does it cost less, right, which is great, but it also decreases the time that you're going to spend in a 4-year college. You can get out of there earlier if you want to, which also takes away some of the costs, and then allows you to get into, if you want to go working or go to a grad degree, more of that money to that kind of stuff, and be able to expand your knowledge on that. What are you seeing with students now from the time you kind of started in coaching and teaching to now? What are some of the things that you've seen that have changed?
Well,
Good or bad?
Good or bad. I think, you'd be remiss to not mention the 1920 school year and what happened in the 2-3 years after that. So inevitably, things are different. Kids are different, but they are different in the respect that their life experiences have been vastly different than any other person that's alive today.
Right. And you're talking post-COVID, right?
Yes. And nobody's had to deal with the circumstances. And I'm not saying how things should have gone or didn't win, or we should have done this or should have done that. Just simply
in general,
life stopped for a couple years. And so that inevitably does have an impact. When you started to come back, it was the emotional maturity that I think when you reflect back on it, what's taken the longest to come back, there's obviously going to be educational gaps. But it's the maturity level of kids. I know when I was at Valley, it felt like that first year back, you had freshmen and they were just doing like middle school things, and you're like, why? But they didn't have that social dynamic during those developmental years. Absolutely. For them to get their middle school behaviors out to high school. I think we're shifting back in that direction. And the other parts of this is cell phones, cell phones, social media. So you're taking these two major influences that none of us out of college or teachers really had to deal with while they were growing up. And I don't think you could say, well, when I was younger, when you were younger, you had to wait by the little by your radio and hope that it came on so you could hit the play and record button on the same time on your cassette so you could record it. Now, Depascale might not know that one. But
I was there, bro. It's okay.
You were in the LimeWire and
Napster
phase. But you think about the on-demand world that kids grow up in.
Instant. They get everything now.
So when you think about as a teacher, you have to teach knowing that that's how their life, and you can't dismiss that. You can't say, well, they should do things differently. No, if you want to engage them for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, you need to move between activities. You need to engage them. Students need to be hands-on. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think maybe 20 years ago, you just sat in class and you did what was expected because you had to, and teachers lectured and talked, and that was fine. People did okay. But I think the expectation, the access to information, the dynamics of the world. I mean, think of it. 20 years ago, your teacher was your sole source of information. There was no. Now you think of a question and you're like, well, who starred in this movie, or what's 8 times 6? You pull your phone out and you got it. Right. So it's like you have to teach knowing that is available. And I think now post-COVID, I think people are getting a better idea of how to do that. And how to navigate that. But I think it's hard to engage kids. Like you think about coaches and players, and I think, our coach just came back, and it's just like hard to get kids to come to practice every day. And I think that's sort of a common thread everywhere, where you're just, there's differences in just showing up. And I think that's something that's hard for coaches, because you need them there all the time. So I think that's probably a difference. I'm hoping that with each year that passes through COVID, as we get farther away from that, those things start to go back to what they were. But I think when I say what they were, that requires coaches, and that requires teachers and school leaders and all of us meeting the needs of the kids where they are, and not just expecting them to show up because you tell them to. You got to make it enjoyable. You got to make it fun. I know,
right.
Coach in Elmwood Park, we trying to get kids to practice. We would play music all during practice. You think about you lift weights, you listen to music. You run, you listen to music. How come when we're practicing, we don't listen to music? And people are like, "Are you afraid they're going to be distracted?" Well, if they're distracted by music, what's going to happen when we're in a game?
On a Friday night when there's cheerleaders, band, fans, everything's going on. Yeah.
So if anything, that response, maybe volume up even louder and get it right in there. And I would put the speaker right behind our offense and put it as loud as I can and say, "Let's go for it." And listen, it made practice went fast. We were fast. We were efficient. We had about an hour and 45 minutes, almost under 2 hour practices, nothing longer than that. Everything that we did on the field was efficient, and we didn't go back. We recorded everything. And this was at a time where I was sending one of our coaches up on a trailer when he was Matt Jimenez, standing up there with an iPhone, the first iPhone, recording practice so we could turn around and watch it. And that's where we'd make our adjustments. And then the next day in practice, you're in individual work. That's where the coaches were focusing on the things they saw yesterday in practice. We weren't stopping in practice. We weren't stopping unless there was this major catastrophe.
Yeah, coach off the tape.
And then when you're in your individual sessions or in your meeting times, that's where you're coming, tweaking those things. And we'd record it, and the kids knew we were recording it. And that's how we were holding them accountable for it.
Matt Jimenez, Waldwick, I think he played.
Yep.
Was
a running back there.
Now, what Derek was saying, Barcata
he's
Payne,
coaching, where the hell is
Northern
Jimenez?
Highlands.
Yeah, he's at Northern Highlands now. I saw him in the summer. So,
yep. So, I mean, Barcata Payne, Matt Jimenez, I coached all those guys, and they were fantastic. So when I got hired, one thing I wanted to do was hire people that I knew and that I trusted.
Right. Farrington, all those guys
did. So I hired a bunch of guys from Montclair, and I got hired at 28 as a head coach. I was the oldest one on staff.
Yep. And
we figured it out year one, made some tweaks, and then year two and year three, we had some guys from Elmwood Park as well. But I was the oldest one on staff during those years, and it's funny, but in my 3 years at Elmwood Park, we had Bobby Guy, who's now the head coach at Westwood. Jackie Marr was on staff 1 year. He's the head coach at Beckton now. Farrington is a head coach at Dumont. I mean, when you look back, we had a pretty good staff, or a mixture of those guys. We had Bobby only for a year and Jackie for a year. But I learned from Bobby. I learned from Marr. And, we took what we learned from them and just continued it going. And they were there during the leaner years, during the 2 years I had, until we really turned the corner. For record, I would say record-wise, we turned it in 2012. But the only reason why 2012 happened is because 2011 did. And even though we went 1-9, you look at it on paper and it didn't look great. That's where our growth came, and that's what built us to be able to do the things we did the next year.
Yeah, places like Elmwood Park have to go through that to get to the other side, because there's no longer. I mean, the old days there was a tradition at places like Elmwood Park, but it changed a lot, and those are the things that it go through. Because I remember that at Powell Park, you'd have the older people talk about the old days, and it's like the old days are different than now. You had to rebuild the tradition. You had to kind of inject that into that place. And but the kids respond. That's the thing that people don't realize. They will respond if you have the right person there. But I always think that kids from Elmwood Park and Saddlebrook and Powell Park, they can read if you're giving them bullshit. They can see it. And if they're feeding them bullshit, they're going to reject it more than other places would, because they see it in their lives a lot. So they're going to reject it in the coach immediately. So guys who are real with them and really want them to succeed have a really good opportunity, if you could fight through the tough years, to really get to the other side, because those kids want that, and those kids desire
that. Was, you know, having gone to Elmwood Park, I knew what, as a coach, I knew what they were going through. I knew what it was like to go through that school. I know what it's like to deal with the rec program. I knew all those guys that were there. You talked about the different experience. I talked about the difference I had. It's similar, you know. I think the biggest compliment I got as a coach was my third year, and one of the guys that was a teacher and a coach when I was in high school, was still working in the district. He said they play like you did, you know, like they took the personality and the approach that I had as a player, and that was what our team was. And it was scrappy. We didn't give up an inch. You know, like we would fight to the death. I mean, the one game in the 2011 year was we were down 21 points at halftime. We were down 21 points 3 different times in the second half, and came back and won in triple overtime. And that was our one win during the year. And so like there was just no quit in them. And I think as a coach, that's what you want. You want them to take on your personality. But to your point, you had to be real with them. You know, I told them, like, you could sit here and we could be the same old Elmwood Park that lost 50 games in a row or whatever the number was. You can do that, and you keep doing it your way, and that's what will happen. But if you want to change, this is what our expectations are. And we would have, I don't know if you remember, Ray Van Peenan was a player at Wayne Hills.
Wayne Hills stud.
My wife went to Wayne Hills, and she was really good friends with his sister. So I actually hired him to come and train our kids, because I don't know if he was doing that. He was doing that. But what I told him, I was like, listen, you come in, but I to talk about what you guys did at Wayne Hills during that winning streak.
Yeah, because they had a hell of a run when he was there. They were
they were on that other side of it, where they were winning 3-4 state championships in a row. I think their first loss was when they started having to make Hills play St. Joe's.
Yeah,
you know, where it's like this unreasonable ask.
Right.
But what he did was he would tell them, listen, we'd practice, then we'd go work out. We'd wake up in the morning, we'd go to the off season. We did this, we did that, we did this. So for me, I'm sitting there telling, if this is what you want, this is what you need to do, because it doesn't happen on Saturdays. It doesn't happen on Fridays by chance or by luck. This happens because of what you've done at the very beginning. And if you're not in that, if that's not what you want to do, you don't have to be here. So we had 27 kids in the program my last year at Elmwood Park, but I'll tell you what, to this day,
those 27,
I would go to bat with those 27 kids at any step of the way, because they were tough. They were doing all the things we asked them to do, but we held them accountable. We did study halls. If you got suspended from school, you got suspended from the game, and we did it. One of our best kids gets suspended. I don't know what to tell you, man. So like, you had to hold them accountable, not just to me, but they had to go tell their teammates why they were suspended. They had to go tell their teammates why they were in detention, and they had to sit, and then now they have to sit out practice. You know, like, they had to be accountable to each other. And all like our workouts, like, you know, all these things were all tied together, that it was us against everybody else. And fortunately they bought in. And to your point, like, they knew that's what I was about. They knew I was about wanting to win there. And we put it together in that 2012 year. And I think that's what made going to administration the hardest, was leaving them. And I'm still friends with, I was actually texting one of the kids, and he's like, you know, we sit around and we're saying, like, if we had you for 3 years, what we could have done, because I had a group of freshmen that were really strong during the 1-11 year. And then they were all sophomores the next year, Michael Dare being one of them. Who was at Rutgers, finished at Sam Houston. And there's a number of them, but they look back on and say, if we could have stayed together, all of us, for the 3 years, what we could have done. And it's like, it kills you, but they say it now. They're like, we recognize it was
right now that they understand, that they respect you, that, you know, your position, which ultimately, like, just shows them too, like, sometimes the hardest decisions that you have to make really can kind of put you in a different position in a positive way. But that's part of life, right? Like you have to kind of weigh your options, figure out what you're going to do. And, you could have, should have, could have, would have type, like, look at it that way, or you can just trust it, own it, and then kind of move forward and continue to just be successful. So on one hand, where it would have been great to like stay with them and win a state title or whatever, but also you taught them that like a life lesson is you're gonna have to make a decision sometimes where you really don't want to, but ultimately like it's gonna work out and those types of things. So
you talk to them about trust, right? You talk to them about trust and family and being accountable, and you would always say like you have to be accountable to your family. You're going to get older. If you have kids, like you can't just off your job because you decided you don't want to go to work that day. You get fired. Now, what are your kids going to do? What's your family going to do that you support them? So, and you go into this situation, here you are, this is a situation that from a family perspective, it was better for my family that's what. And so like you said, you look back and like you said, there's not a day that goes by that you not necessarily second guess, but you wonder if that didn't happen. Stayed for the other 2 years, and I say just 2, but for those guys, their 2 years, what could have happened? So, but at the end of the day, I can't regret that decision because to where I am now. Valley was an awesome experience. I know people have their feelings about Wayne in general. I loved it. I love my time at Valley. We was able to find success there, and then now it's providing to come to Pompton Lakes. But like I said, it's been a ride. And like you said, you look back on every decision you make, good or bad. Good thing that happens, bad thing that happens. Every time you're told you can't do something or you're not able to do it. When I left Dumont, somebody that I respect a lot told me, you're going to be here. You're a big fish in a small pond. You go to Wayne, you're going to be just, you're going to get lost in the mix. 6 years later, I'm named assistant principal of the year. So who got lost in the mix? It's little things like that, you can't necessarily, like, I don't listen to what a lot of people say in the way of people are going to have their opinions and people are going to feel how they feel.
Always.
Okay. I just know what my worth is, and I know where my value is and my work ethic and what that means and what that's going to mean for the people around me and how I try to do right by the people. And at the end of the day, whether you're a coach, teacher, administrator, you want to leave a place. When you leave a place, you want to know you made it better because you were there. And if I could say I did that, then it's a success.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely the key. It's some really, really interesting things from when you were coaching. I'm curious now, like when you're at Pompton Lakes and the way that things have changed educationally, because of COVID, and I guess they're starting to come back a little bit. But what are some of the things that you have to do now that's changed in order to engage kids, get teachers to be able to engage? Like, when you listen to the teachers and they're telling you, they're struggling with this, they're struggling with that. Like, how do you get them to engage more? Because bringing back to football, the thing that you did, practicing an hour and 40 minutes. Okay, at the time, like I was forced to do that at Powell Park because we had a bus thing. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened. I realized, like, the light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm forced to get all this done, move super fast. And the kids loved it. Like, I forced them to compete more because we just didn't have time like you did in the old days to put all – because they had to get them on a bus at a certain time. And, so that was kind of an innovation that you see now all the time, right? Like I talked about – I don't remember what I was talking about. But Indiana, the coach there, Kurt Signetti, goes an hour and 40 minutes in practice. I think that was maybe when we were talking to Tony Holland, right?
Yeah.
So what you were doing back then in high school, what you had changed to really help your kids be more effective in what they're doing is now something that's beginning to widespread throughout everywhere and in college. And guys are realizing that, sometimes less is more. And that's social media era kids. Like, that's kind of what you have to do. What are some of the things that you're trying to help teachers to do to engage kids better now?
And I think when you look at the hour and 45 minutes, I don't know if it's necessarily more like less with like doing more with less time, But when you think about that more with less time, you're more on task.
Yeah.
Right? So like you're going, there's not a lot of wasted time. You know, like our kids would run around the backstop at Elmwood Park, and we would be setting up the next drills, and we would have the coaches go run, and they had the time it took for them to jog around the field to come back and then get the next thing started. And you were always on task. There wasn't a lot of standing around. And when you think about a classroom, how do you manage the time? How do you get them more on task? Get them more involved, have them do more of the work, have them sit in groups and work together, present, share their answers, making it more student-centered rather than teacher-centric. And about coaching, that hour and 40, I bet if you looked at their timing, that hour and 40 is super efficient. There's not a lot of wasted downtime. There's not a lot of a coach just standing up there talking at them too long. They're doing. They're constantly doing. And as a teacher, to hold kids' attention, you need them to be constantly doing. Because, yeah, if they stand there, they have their computer out in front of them, they can switch between tabs real quick, all those things. Engaged. You know, one of the things we did this year was walking into classes, kids have to drop their cell phones in a pouch. And it's helped, but it's taken the teachers buying in, it's taken the kids buying in. And we told the teachers and we told the kids, this was myself and the assistant principal, this is our plan. So don't get mad at the teacher because they're making you put their phone in the thing. We're going to get mad at the teacher if they don't make you put the phone in the pouch. And what that does is now distraction away. But now in turn, the conversation I had with our teachers is now your lessons need to be engaging. Like you can't just expect them to put their phones to the side and then sit there like robots and just sit there and listen.
Because now like we're holding you accountable. You better do something, right? It's like, hey, it's like, and that's like the ultimate thing too, right? Like coaches always want to, you know, preach about this standard, this, and then that coach doesn't follow it, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like, and look, Dave and I, we've been through this, you know, having coached with him and whatnot. And it's, you know, the whole like, hey, here are the rules, right? It's more of guidelines in terms of that nature, right? And then, but also I just think like now as a teacher, if I know, right, you kind of have that wiggle room with a phone, right? If your thing's not engaging, then a kid's going to go off on his phone doing whatever, okay, at least he won't be a problem. He's just, you know, whatever. He's just doing not what I'm asking him to do, but he's not distracting the others that are involved. Yeah. Now I'm asking everybody to turn to that phone. Well, you better be on point because that kid who now was distracted by his phone is now going to be all eyes on you. And if it's not engaging, now I'm causing an issue, and now the whole class becomes an issue. So, you know, it's a way, you know, your checks and balances, right? And it's like, hey, now you're held accountable. Like, do what you're supposed to do.
And that's where it goes back to just so you were saying earlier about it's efficiency with your time. And the more on task kids are, the more engaged they are, the less time they have for the distractions, disruptions, and the more they're doing, that's what they want to be able to do. They want to be hands-on. That's why you see a stronger push for internships and like the structured learning environments. You're seeing more and more kids wanting to do things and be engaged in the lesson. And when you think about coaching, as a head coach, I never wanted to have kids standing around. That just irritated. But how do you do that? You have to be efficient. You have to keep people involved. I mean, we were constantly one thing to the next, and it took coordination with the coaches to do that. And Dave, to your point, we didn't have light, and I was coming from Dumont. So there was times where I wouldn't get to practice till almost 4:00 because by the time I got out of there, if I hit traffic or anything like that. So I was always running sort of late to practice. And then as the year went on, we don't have lights. We didn't have lights at the time. So you were on, like now you'd be on a timeline in terms of how much practice time you got in before it's just too dark to do anything. But it's funny. I think we had Darren Cooper came to one of our practices.
Love Cooper.
And like you could barely see by the time he got there. We're just finishing up team. You have the music blasting in the background. Kids are dancing and having a good time, but we're running through team and we're going no huddle and just play after play. You yelling out down and distances for the plays. And it's like controlled chaos, but there was nobody standing around. Everybody was on task. Everybody was engaged. I mean, that was who we were during those years, and it was a blast. Like I said, and for me, the part about coaching, I love those kids, man. They were so fun. I had a blast. I still laugh about some of the things they said and have done, and now and trying to get in touch with them now that they're in their late 20s. It's funny to get perspective on things, and what they thought about why we did certain things. And
it's always good to get that feedback. It's kind of funny when we get them now, dude. Like, it's awesome, right? Because we're at that stage of getting
married
and freaking having kids and doing all this other stuff, right? Like, it's like, oh wow, you guys are humans now, like,
And we would do like loafs, right? So if you wouldn't finish a play in a game, you'd get written up. You'd have to run. We started doing it in practice. So as we're recording stuff, if we saw kids walking around, or the biggest one as coaches, I'm sure you can understand, palms up. Like when you yell at them about something and you give you the palms up,
all the body language stuff.
Automatic, you're running. But I'll tell you what, we would tell the kids you had to wear certain colors to practice, right?
Yep.
Red, white, gray. We want to
something along those school colors.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you what, one of wrong color, he was running the same loaf. I ran them I've run them when I was coaching. We held everybody to the same standard. But what that did was it reinforced the movement from one session to the other, one time to the other. And that's why we tried to make practices so hard and so efficient that when the games came, it came easier. So I would take that. That's the same approach I talk to our teachers about, obviously not running them into the ground or anything, that they're always engaged and that they're in different activities and that you're not spending too much time on one particular thing.
Right.
Coach, it was phenomenal having you on, dude. I learned a whole lot. And it's great talking to somebody that is in a different space to what we normally are talking to, and
awesome.
Just a leadership that you're able to really express and teach to the kids every day and to your teachers, and it's phenomenal. So it's really great to have you on today.
I appreciate it, man. It was a blast, and like I said, it's great that you guys are doing this because it goes into that networking and being able to learn from other people and learn from what people are doing. It's just great. So if ever I could help, I'm all here to help everybody.
Appreciate you, Coach, man.
Have a great day, Coach.
Awesome. All right, man. Talk to you soon, man. Thanks, dude.
All right, bye. That was phenomenal. That was excellent.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's like, and you could just tell, like, he's lived that fullback life, right? Like you know what I mean? The undersized, like, whatever. He ends up being a captain by his senior year and just like kind of stuck with that, and right, and then gets right into coaching and doing all that stuff, and like you just watch that progression, and like you said, like I've seen him move from all of these roles, and just like like that guy's going to be successful no matter what he does. You know what I mean? And then I remember when he took that Wayne Valley gig to be a VP, like you said, like big fish, or like big fish, small pond. Now all of a sudden you're going to a big pond. Right. And then to become like a bigger, I believe he was like one of 4 VPs when he went there. You know what I mean? Like, and then now he's the principal of a school that, like you said, has a lot of tradition and it's positive and, but it's different, right? Like you heard about some of the things that he's talking about with, putting kids into, trades and all that other kind of stuff. Like that's a very different look than what Wayne would be, right? Like we're talking talent dynamics and things like, so just the fact that he can like pivot around that and make those moves and then ultimately like put everybody in the best, success, right? In the best position to be successful, like just goes to show like, how you move and all those kinds of things. I mean, look, coaching at Elmwood Park, bro, like we know from like, that's no easy task.
Yeah, no, listen to him talk. It just reminds me of like some similarities of things that you would have to do. And it takes a unique person to go into those situations and succeed because you can't approach certain areas where there may have been a tradition in the old days, but there's no longer a tradition, and you can't approach it just going with a traditional method because you have to be able to adapt to the kids tremendously
or everything that's going on. Like you're talking about a guy like he took a job where they don't have lights to practice. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, funny. I didn't say it was the same thing So
like some people wouldn't even have taken that job to begin
we had
with.
that same, unless we went down to the turf field, which was away from our school. We practiced at the school, and there's no
Right,
lights.
like these are things that not a lot of coaches could handle or would even put themselves in the position to try and do that stuff. You know what I mean? Like
it reminds me because he when he was talking about what they were doing, and Darren Coop was coming there and it's dark. We had to, when it was dark, like it would turn dark, like when the light changed over. We had to make sure we did our passing stuff.
Yeah, early so that you could like.
Yeah, we would revert. You know what's funny? I mean, it's like this is making me think back to like the.
Well, think about it. He was there 2012, right? And that's when you were at Palisades Park, right? So it all kind of matches up, like right in that same.
Do individuals sometimes after we did team. We would sometimes try to go to team and
because you had to.
And then we'd come back to individual at the end, like do individual, some tackle. We do it like we would, because when it was dark out, like we had the, what do you call it? Like the what do they call those lights that they're not regular lights? They're like street lights. The street lights.
Yeah, they're like they just bring them in. They're like the mobile ones.
But you could kind of tackle in the dark. You know what I mean? You could kind of do some of the drills in the dark, but you couldn't throw the ball obviously effectively in the dark. So it's pretty funny. It's great. It's great to hear that. So really good stuff. I of course have to jump onto another one for some reason.
Go get them, buddy. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Yep. All right. There.